Now that we have our movement holder installed, the movement and dial and hands installed in the case, we can begin the process of cutting the crown stem and really get into completing the watch. So we do have a screw down crown. So that is a nice feature, but it also makes the crown installation a little more difficult, not a lot more. But you figure you've got to make it so when the crown is in the winding position, that is the point where the crown is just been unscrewed from the screw down crown. So you are not cutting enough crown stem that the crown is all the way back. You've got to figure the distance here. Get a better look at that case. On the case cushion you can't really see it. The distance here from the end of the crown tube, the threaded crown tube, to the inside of the crown, that distance there is what we need to cut off our crown stem. So, and really, possibly even more than that, I'm going to just go ahead and show you what I do, which is I would have some digital calipers. I know this isn't included in the Esslinger kit. There's a lot of use of with these, especially with with changing out bands, not just for this watch, but for other watches. A lot of good reasons to have a digital caliper. You don't have to use one. You could use a ruler. There's even a spring bar tool in the Esslinger toolkit that does have millimeters listed on it. Not quite as accurate as the caliper. Esslinger sells this for like 20 bucks, and you know what? I really like it. It's a carbon fiber composite end. Some of the other calipers I've had have been metal, which you always end up wrapping in tape because you don't want to put metal to metal when you're measuring a case or lugs or whatever. So I really do like these, and it's 20 bucks, not a major investment, but very useful in your watch build and very useful later on just as you deal with watches. So I'm going to guess, it looks right there that about 3.6 millimeters needs to be removed from the crown stem, at least initially. So we're going to go ahead and push our detent, pull out our crown, unscrew the crown from the stem, the stem itself is 20. And I know from past experience cutting these, and I don't want you to just do it to that exact measurement because there could be little variances with your case, that it's about 16.5 millimeter. 16.3 is the total distance you want on the crown. Crown stem. But I'm just going to go off my measurements of, I know I at least have to cut 3.3 millimeters. Off. So this is where the Sharpie comes in. Get your caliper out, or however you're doing your measurements, and we're saying we want 3.3 millimeters off. And I'm going to mark it. I'm going to go in to show you what I'm doing here. I'm simply marking the end of the crown stem, that approximate 3.2, 3.3 millimeters that we measured at minimum needs to get cut off. That gives you a reference for when you're cutting. I would always err on cutting too little off, not too much. You can always cut it shorter, you can never cut it longer. So I've got it marked. I'm going to go ahead and put my case and movement in my petri dish, because when you cut the crown stem it goes flying, and I don't want it to end up in my balance wheel. If there's someone sitting to the right of you at this point when you're doing your cutting, they better watch out, because it goes flying. So I'm going to go ahead and cut right to where I marked with my trusty side cutters. And what you're wanting to do is noticing the ridge of my cutters. That's where it cuts. That's exactly where you want to put the end of your black mark to cut it down the length. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it. Sure I got it lined up there. My black mark. Got it. Okay. So this is where your file comes into play. Again, this is just a file I picked up at Bass Pro Shop a while ago for sharpening knives. I like it because it has this ridge here. And I'm just gonna, this is never something I'm going to be able to show that well on camera because the crown stem is too smart, but under optics you would be able to see it. When you make your cut, it's not going to be perfectly clean. You want to kind of use your file to file off the rough edges, the burrs. If you cut in between a threading, you don't want to miss a threading, so you're just cutting it down so it looks nice and even on the tip. And if you haven't done that, you'll notice that your crown doesn't want to thread in too well. And that's good because I got it threaded on perfectly. Now there is I just held it, and you know, I find just holding the crown stem works, but there is a pin vise in your Esslinger toolkit. Looks like this. It's got two different sides, and what you can do while you're doing your filing is stick the crown stem in your pin vise. And secure it on tightly, and then you could do your filing while it's held in the pin vise. But you know, I've found that I don't mind doing it without the pin vise. Seems to have always worked well for me, not using that tool. So I'm going to take the crown and crown stem, get my case back out, and with the crown threaded on there tightly, I'm going to go ahead and reinsert it. Didn't push the detent, probably should have. So there it is in winding position. Bring it in close. I'm in winding. There's a third position for time setting. But you can hear it make the winding sound. And when I push in, you can see that I'm not able to get threaded all the way. I'm just barely able to thread onto the end of the crown tube. And I can see that that measurement there appears to be 0.8 millimeter. I'm going to bring it out a little bit here. Yeah, about 1 millimeter needs to be taken off. So I'm going to unscrew the crown. You can see right now I'm at 17. Well, it looks like maybe 17.1. No, just about, no. Yeah, about 17. So taking it down a full millimeter, the rule of thumb is about 16.3. I don't want to take off too much. Never take off too much. So it looks like it's a millimeter. I'm not going to take a full millimeter. I'm going to take like 0.7 off. Which, as you can see, is almost nothing. I'm going to go ahead and mark it again. Now I'm going to cut it one more time. Just barely, just almost nothing off. Didn't get the cleanest of cuts on that, but that's okay, we can file it. I might have broken my own rule and taken too much off, but that's okay. You can get additional crown stems from Esslinger, so it's not the end of the world. They're only a couple bucks. Looks like I'm about 16.2. I may be too short. We'll find out. I'm going to file it. Not much. Being that I'm worried that I might be too short. Let's go ahead and rethread. Test it out. The thing is, now that you've been through this process, you kind of know how to repair a watch, right? Like if you have a broken crown, or you know, you need to get into a watch. I mean, I've been able to work on my own watches now, and it's kind of fun to be able to do it. I mean, I wouldn't try to work on a FP Journe or a Patek or something like that, but I mean, if it's your Seiko or something, you know how to replace a crown at this point. There we go. That might be all right. In the winding position, I'm not threading back onto the case. That's really what you're looking for, that in the winding position, which is the first position, or the position all the way in, you can wind, and I'm able to wind, and I'm not rethreading. So let's try to thread it down and see where we are. Looking perfect. So we're ready to glue. We're done. We've cut the crown stem to the appropriate length.